Welcome to Lord of the Rings, a podcast dedicated to Lord of the Rings, the card game. My name's John, and here's my co-host. His love for the Halfling's Leaf has slowed his mind. It's Emery.
Hi, John. That's actually, sadly, probably a bit truer than it should be. But just those days are long behind me. I'd like to make that clear.
So we're back.
We're back.
We had a little bit of time off, but we promised we'd come back, and come back we did. So how have you been? How did you spend your time off?
Well, I guess true to tradition, we're still kind of still in the lockdown here in the UK for the coronavirus. Things got a bit looser, but we're still essentially getting told to stay at home and do all of that good stuff. So it's actually been very similar to last time.
I can't wait for this coronavirus thing to be over for obvious reasons, but also so that you've done some more interesting things between shows.
I mean, I feel exactly the same way. Trust me. This does go against my natural programming. So like an exploration of inner space. Getting stuck inside an apartment. But yeah, I've so what have I been doing? Anything? I'm trying to think of anything interesting we're doing. Just doing some reading, catching up on some films and TV shows and stuff. And yeah, that's really been about it. Pretty boring stuff.
No,
how about you?
That's fair enough. Well, actually, I took a whole week away from Lord of the Rings, so no podcast, no playing, no watching the films, no reading the books. Just sort of cleanse my my Lord of the Rings soul a little bit. And actually, it was pretty good. It just made me grind myself a bit. So when I came back to playing the game, I was full of gusto and excited to play. And now I'm back into it full swing and yeah, loving it. But other than that, yeah, not a lot. see, I had to go at you for having not done anything. I really haven't done very much either.
I think the old conversational tropes of "How are you?" present a much bigger challenge than they did. Oh yeah, how have you been? Present a much bigger challenge than they did 2 months ago. It's like, what have you been up to?
I tell you what I did do. This is related to the last episode. Last episode, you may recall that we were discussing Escape from Dol Guldur, and we mentioned that perhaps if you were playing solo, you could play with more than one deck, but just still by yourself. And I referred to this act as double fisting.
Yes, I recall.
Now, this caused quite a discussion online.
Oh, did it? Oh, God. Where have you been going on the internet? Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, most people in the community were saying that they did indeed know it as double fisting and indeed as playing two-handed. But there was quite a discussion to say that perhaps it wasn't really known as that, and people didn't really call it that anymore. Maybe I'm just a bit behind the times when it came to it. So I thought, I love democracy, and humour is the very essence of a democratic society.
That's true.
So, so I decided I'd put it to a vote. So I set up a poll in 3 different places on the internet. I set one up on Board Game Geek, I set one up on the Fantasy Flight forums, and I set one up on
and the
Twitter.
The other one you can't mention.
No. Yeah, and so I thought I'd find out, what should we be calling this? And I would accept the results. And the results are in. I said I would mention it on this show about what happened. And the overwhelming winner is two-handed. By a long margin. So on Board Game Geek, I think there was, at the time of recording, there was well over 100 people had voted, and I think it's roughly 97% for two-handed and about 2.8% for double-fisted and 0.2% of something else entirely, which I don't know what that would be, but there you go.
So my take on it, being a bit of a, having no real insight into this or the history of it, was, I mean, you get dealt a hand, right? So two-handed kind of makes sense, or double-decker. That might be a good one to call it. Play with 2 decks. But where did double-fisted come from in the first place? Because it sounds to me like there was a small number of people on one thread somewhere on one of these websites and somebody played a trick on them and they just, oh yes, I'm pretty sure it doesn't mention double-fisted in the rule book, right? Does it?
No, it doesn't. But to be fair, it doesn't mention two-handed either. So that was Board Game Geek. It was like I say, about 98% to 2%. On Fantasy Flight, it was 100% for two-handed.
God bless democracy.
And on Twitter, it was a little bit different. I think it's 15% for double-fisted and 85% for two-handed. So obviously, people are just a little bit more messed up on Twitter, but I think we know that.
Well, yes, that's that point proof.
Okay. So not to dwell, but I'm just going to tell you, I'm drawing a line under it. Double-fisted is dead. Two-handed all the way. Not that I ever play two-handed.
By the way, from this moment forward, I will be referring to it as double-deckers when I play that. Double-decked, just to be contrarian. That's how I roll.
You're that 0.2%.
Yep. So you got to have them. That's part of democracy too.
Absolutely. So I did that. So that I feel like we can draw a line under that now.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've done a good, thorough test there. So yeah, I think you can draw a line under it quite safely.
And other than that, we've both been spending a bit of time working out how this podcast is going to continue, because obviously up until this point we've been just going through the core set and we know that everyone has a core set, so the podcasts themselves kind of structured themselves naturally. I mean, we went through the core cards and we went through the core set adventures, and I think that all made perfect sense. But we had to sort of think, how are we going to move this forward? Sort of knowing that we wanted to play through the game progressively, starting with the first cycle, of course. But as I think most listeners are aware, we both hate spoilers when it comes to anything. But I think especially important when you're buying a card game which progresses in time. So we had to kind of make a decision about how to proceed, and this is what we've come up with. So basically, we will be playing through the APs in order, as we always set out to do. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep those episodes as completely self-contained episodes. So basically, what you can do is you can just class that entire episode as a spoiler episode, and it will be clearly marked in the show notes as a spoiler episode and which AP we're discussing. So it's easy to go and find the specific episodes if you want to listen to them in any particular order. And we'll, of course, put an audio spoiler warning on it as well. And then in between those episodes, we're going to sort of carry on our regular chit-chat about the game in general. And, of course, the player cards that you receive in the adventure packs and the deluxe packs. Now, the decision we wrangled with and eventually came to is that we've pretty much decided that player cards are not going to be classed as spoilers in our world. Because, I mean, it's a podcast about a card game. It's pretty difficult to talk about card games without talking about the cards. So we had to draw a line somewhere. So basically what we're going to do is, as we go through a cycle, we are going to talk about player cards that are from that entire cycle and not necessarily in the order of release. But we won't talk about cards beyond that cycle until we have finished going through those APs. And I think that's a pretty fair compromise.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we won't be discussing any cards from Khazad Dûm or Dwar Delph, whatever, until we've progressed all the way through the adventure packs from the Mirkwood cycle.
Yeah, and by doing it this way, it allows us to talk about the player cards in the sense of spheres and synergy without just talking about the order of release. Because what you find when you work your way through the APs is that you'll get sort of a smattering of Rohan here, a touch of Eagles there, and they don't tend to come together until you've collected them all. I mean, this is why they release it in this way, is that you want to get more cards to bolster the deck that you're starting to build. So in a way, it makes it more interesting and more fun to talk about if we can talk about them in groups rather than sort of drip feeding them from one episode to the next.
Yes, and I think it's still going to be clear to people just by reading the description of any episode what's going to be covered in it. So, for example, if we're going to talk about cards from the tactic sphere in the Mirkwood cycle, it's going to say that pretty clearly in the notes on the podcast. So I guess if somebody did not want to see that, say, actually, you know what, I want to wait till I've seen the cards myself or whatever it is, then obviously, they can just look at that and skip it as they see fit.
Yep. I mean, basically, if you want to hear this, you'll listen to it. If you don't want to listen to it, then that's up to you.
So we're gonna stop all the blackmailing and kidnapping we've done so far to bolster the numbers, right?
Yeah,
it ends here.
That's got to end. But with that in mind, though, some of the sort of regular extra parts of the show, such as the fact of the week, I think we'll be keeping those in the sort of the non-spoiler episodes. So if you see that we've released an episode for Conflict at the Carrack or whatever, and you think, oh, I haven't played that yet, I don't want to listen to that, I think it's better that you just know you can just skip the whole episode until you're ready. You're not going to be missing any extra content. We'll keep all the extra bits. I mean, you'll be missing all the fun and games and tomfoolery, but you won't be missing any Lord of the Rings content. We'll make sure that's all contained in the non-spoiler episodes.
Yeah, cool.
So with that in mind, this is a spoiler episode, so thanks for listening. No, this is going to be a spoiler episode. So this is going to be an episode where we're going to discuss the first AP that was released, which was A Hunt for Gollum.
Or The Hunt for Gollum.
Is it The Hunt for Gollum or?
Yes. It's not, but so you only do it once. Oh, but actually, that's okay. There's something we're going to come to later on. But bear that in mind for later. Actually, John, that's triggered something. Actually.
Okay, and this is where we'll put the spoiler warning in. So, spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning.
Just leave it like that.
Yeah.
Two men lose their minds. The remainder of this episode contains spoilers for The Hunt for Gollum. If you don't wish to hear any spoilers for this scenario, please join us again next time on Later Rings.
Okay, so at what point am I supposed to remind you about that thing? Silence.
So, you know what? I will remember myself.
Oh.
I think I've recovered from the Halfling's Leaf enough after all these years to probably have, some kind of short-term memory ability.
I'm not so sure myself.
Let's test it.
Okay, so Hunt for Gollum. As mentioned, it's the first AP that was...
It's called The Hunt for Gollum.
So,
Hunt for Gollum.
Hunt for Gollum was the first AP released. And yeah, it was the first AP I played because I played everything in order. And I just played it again recently for this podcast. And we're going to discuss it. So, do you want anything to say before we crack on with it, Em?
Not really, apart from, I guess, it wasn't the first one I played outside the core set. Only because the first time I played a game was with yourself, and you played it for a long time before I got it. So we played the core set once together. Then we did play a couple of other adventures, random quests from. I think we might have played one from this cycle actually. But we'll come on to that. But the point I'm trying to make is this wasn't the first one outside the core set which I saw. So I guess when you saw it for the first time, it was a bit like going out into a bigger world of a game for the first time after having the core set for ages.
It was lovely. It was lovely because it was a new adventure. Ooh, excuse me. Yeah, it was a new adventure for a start, and new player cards. Oh boy, it was nice to have new player cards. that suddenly opened my mind to how brilliant this was going to be.
I was going to say, I bet you can see the possibilities suddenly open up, right, and get you excited for the next ones.
Yeah. So I hope you played through it.
I have. So I played this probably a couple of months ago, first time, I think we played it together, didn't we, a while back too, a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
And was that the one that took us ages? There was one that we played together. It just took hours.
It took hours and hours and hours. And actually, when I played through it solo just the other day, it also wasn't short.
It wasn't too bad. So I remember it took a long time the first time, and it took me a couple of goes to do it. And then when I've come back to it again solo now, I got through it easier. But I think that was because I had experience of it and I knew kind of what to expect. And it was still kind of fresh in my mind for some reason. It's quite a unique kind of quest, so it kind of stuck in my mind.
I wish it had stuck in my mind because, and I had not been on the Halfling's Leaf, because I played through it going, oh, I'm doing pretty well. And then something happened, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but basically between stage 2 and stage 3, and I went, should have remembered that.
Oh, I think I had this experience too. Yes. Okay.
So let's start at the beginning, and we can recount our experiences.
All right.
Okay, so the hunt for Gollum.
Yes. And the first card.
It starts with the first card. Have you got it there?
Which is called The Hunt Begins. Okay. Gandalf has requested your assistance in the search for the elusive creature known as Gollum. Your search begins in Anduin Valley, between Mirkwood Forest and the Misty Mountains. So that's the background, and the setup is reveal 1 card per player from the encounter deck and add it to the staging area.
Simple enough.
So flip it over, and you see that you need 8 progress to complete this card. And then it says, you make your way along the banks of the Anduin River, a likely place for Gollum to find food. Forced.
A likely place.
You just see him grabbing that live fish, bashing it on the rocks. Was it wet and wriggling or whatever it was? I can't remember. Anyway, forced. After the players quest successfully, the first player looks at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck, reveal and add 1 of those cards to the staging area, and discard the other 2 cards.
So it's a pretty simple process. So obviously, the whole idea of this is that you can get through that encounter deck quite quickly, and also you can sort of manipulate what's coming up. And this actually I found pretty useful, because what I found with this quest is that when you're starting out, there are some pretty nasty enemies and treacheries in there, which are dependent on how high your threat is or how many allies you've got. So to be able to sort of look at 3 cards, and I mean, there's a downside that you have to add 1 to the staging area, but the fact that you can throw 2 away, I thought was actually a godsend, because at times you could really make sure that you weren't seeing those cards at that point, but then also that you could just get rid of them and not see them later. But aside from that, there is an ulterior motive for cycling through the encounter deck rather than just being able to manipulate what you see each round, and that's the objectives that are buried within. And it's not mentioned on that first quest card, but I believe it is actually in the sort of extra rules insert that you get with the first AP. Is that right, Em?
Yeah, that's right. I've got it in front of me, actually. And this is one of the rare cases, I think, where you do find out something from the insert sheet, which you don't see straight away on the cards. Usually, I guess my experience of having played through a couple of cycles now is, a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, you can just go straight into the cards if you want to. But this one...
Yeah, the rule sheets do tend to just, if there's a new keyword or something like that would need to be explained, then that's definitely where you'll find that information. But you're right. When it comes to the actual sort of included cards, normally, yeah, like you say, it's normally printed pretty clearly on the quest, but not in this case, apparently.
Yeah, so it's actually got 2 sections, and I think one of them is better to kind of not know, in my opinion, when you first played a game, which is kind of interesting, but we'll speak about that later. Okay. And the first section on the insert sheet it says, for Signs of Gollum objective cards, in this scenario, players are searching for clue objective cards titled Signs of Gollum. There are 4 copies of this card in the encounter deck. Players should try to find and claim as many copies of this card as they can while playing the scenario. So that's to be discussed as well.
You know what? I should have read that. I should.
And then, So it's telling you straight off about what you kind of meant to do in regards to, well, it's called an objective, so I guess you could probably figure it out. But then it says, in the second paragraph, it says, when one of these cards is claimed, its card text transforms it into a condition attachment, and it is attached to a hero committed to the quest, with text that returns the card to the top of the encounter deck if the attached hero is damaged. Okay. Additionally, if the attached hero is destroyed or leaves play for any other reason, the Signs of Gollum objective card is returned to the top of the encounter deck. So that's what it says on the insert sheet. What it says on the card, I've got a card in front of me as well. So Signs of Gollum objective card is it's a clue, it's guarded. Response. After the players quest successfully, the players may claim Signs of Gollum if it has no attached encounters. When claimed, attach Signs of Gollum to any hero committed to the quest. So that lines up with what it says on the card. And then in brackets, counts as a condition attachment with forced after attached hero is damaged or leaves play, return this card to the top of the encounter deck. So you could just use what it says on the card and figure out the fact that it says objective on it. Oh, okay, that's come up. Yeah. I'll have to see. Actually, so thinking about this further, I wonder if it is better when you first play it not to read that insert sheet.
Yeah, maybe just so you got the sort of element of surprise and yeah.
Although it does sometimes give you a little bit of extra background to the context of the quest as well. So in terms of theming and stuff, it's sometimes good to read that. But
I think you do always have to read it, because if there is a new keyword in there, which there are lots of new keywords that come up throughout the game, you're going to be lost in the dark. A light in the dark.
Maybe the best way to do it, Ben, and these are just suggestions off the top of my head, really, but maybe the best thing to do is just play. If you come across something you don't understand, then refer to it. Because they've normally got a header, haven't they?
That's true.
I don't know. I'm just trying to make it as mysterious as possible, I think.
Try playing with the cards the wrong way up.
Yeah. That's what our Southern Hemisphere listeners do, I guess. Yeah, I know it depends which way you can flip it round, and yeah, I know. That's what my Australian friends always tell me that. But yes, that's the objectives.
So I played through this quest with a deck made up of cards purely up from the first cycle. I didn't restrict myself to a purely progressive deck. I mean, much like we talked about earlier, I'm basically going to use the player cards that we are going to talk about in upcoming episodes. So I basically used player cards right up to the end of Shadows of Mirkwood. I had a very low starting threat. I think 24. I had Eowyn, Legolas, and Dune here. So actually, yeah, I had just core set heroes, and it gave me an opportunity to sort of structure a deck in ways that I probably wouldn't normally have done back then, and probably wouldn't normally do now. So just almost just fun exploration. So I made a kind of a deck which had a bit of fighting and a bit of questing, and also I had a song card which allowed me to use resources to buy leadership cards. So I put just a touch of leadership in there. I basically put Calabrian Stone in there, and with the idea that if I could get that onto Eowyn, she could just be my pure quester all the way. So that would give her 2 extra willpower. And I also had Steward of Gondor, because if you're going to have any sort of leadership, you might as well put Steward of Gondor in there. So in the end, I had Eowyn with that song and Steward of Gondor and Calabrian Stone. So she was making money, she was questing for 6, and with that in mind, I knew that if any of my trackers or scouts came out, I could easily afford them. And then I still had Dune here and Legolas around for any fighting that came up. So for this, I basically managed just to plow, and those cards came out pretty quick, so I managed to plow through this first quest card without any trouble really whatsoever.
Yeah, interesting. So I think the first time I did this, I had a really similar deck, and it was actually based on the one that I'd used for the Journey Along the Anduin. So it was the same heroes I had then, which was Dunhir, Eowyn, so same as you, but I'd Tharlin rather than Legolas. But pretty much the same. I didn't have any leadership. But that deck actually, that got through, if I remember correctly, fairly quickly, that first quest card. When I played this the other day, I actually tried out a 2-hero deck. So I just had Theodred and Eowyn.
Interesting.
And when I did it this time, I actually used cards from not even just the cycle, but a couple of future ones as well. So
Okay.
it's the first time really I've gone back to one of these just to see, and with only 2 heroes, and actually got through. I'm not mega easily or anything, but it was still a challenge. But I don't think I could possibly have done it with just 2 without using some of those cards you get in the future. I just wanted to see how much that sort of changed for the dynamic. And then when we played it together, the deck I used was comprised of, I think, just cards from the cycle. And I think when we did it that time, the heroes I used were Aragorn, Beravor, and Bilbo. And so it's leadership and lore, but I think that's because you had tactics and spirit in your deck when we did it that time.
Yeah, I think so. I think we tried to balance the two decks, so we had everything going for us.
Yeah, allegedly.
I think also just because the ability to see 3 extra cards from the encounter deck to look for these clues, it was all very well and good, but I didn't see a single one. In that first round, though, I did see 2 clues as shadow cards, which was very annoying because, of course, if there is no shadow effect, and that means it just gets sent straight to the discard pile. And I couldn't remember how many clues there were, but I did know I needed some. And I mean, I didn't lose too much sleep over it. I was doing fine, but it was just a little bit annoying. But other than that, I'd got through this first card relatively easily.
Yeah, I had exactly the same thing. So I had 2 come up as shadows, which is, I had exactly the same experience as you. I think, how many of those are there? Even I think I should have read through the sheet again, because it says there are 4 in there. So,
this sheet has everything.
Yeah, exactly. So getting through this card, I think this deck generally, or the encounters, I guess, there's some nasty treachery in here, and there's a whole bunch of locations that you find along the river. There aren't that many enemies. That was my experience. Maybe I just got lucky with a draw or what have you, but that was my experience of it. There weren't too many enemies which came up because of this.
Well, actually, I think the first card that came off the deck for me was the Hunters of Mordor, which is a particularly nasty enemy. I'll just quickly read that out for the listeners. So it's the Hunters from Mordor. They have an engagement cost of 34. They have threat of 2. They hit for 2. They defend for 2. And they have a massive 6 hit points. Their type is just Mordor. They're just Mordor.
And that's not even the worst of it.
No, but are they men? Are they orcs? Are they goblins? No, they're just Mordor. But they're the hunters from Mordor. Anyway, but they have an effect that says the hunters from Mordor get +2 attack and +2 threat for each clue card in play. Now, like I said, I think this was the first card I got off the deck, so there were no clue cards in play. So I wasn't too worried about that forced effect. And if you remember, I said my starting threat was at 24. So I had to sort of make a decision what I was going to do because I had no allies out or anything like that yet. So because their willpower is only 2 unless there are clue cards out, I kind of just left them up there in the staging area and once around spammed them with Dune here, just because he hits for 2 but gets the extra 1 if he's attacking in the staging area. So he could just tickle them just each round, just taking a little bit of a hit.
He's not even a king. But you're quite right. Yeah, that's the great thing about having Dune here. If you're not engaging enemies, you can just slowly chip away at them. That's absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, and actually, after this point, I didn't really use Dune his ability much more in the game. But for those beginning rounds, it just took enough. And then basically I waited till I just chipped them down enough. So then I knew at what point I could optionally engage them and then kill them with Legolas. And I think I had another ally out at that time. And then to give me some extra progress on the quest. Yeah, so that but it is a particularly nasty enemy if you have clue cards out. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, horrible. And there's a fair few of them in the deck as well, I think. Yeah, I went through this just trying to avoid engagements as much as possible.
Yeah, but there are some pretty tricky locations too. I mean, we're mostly hanging around the Anduin again, and I got a bit lucky that I did have Banks of the Anduin. In fact, I think I had 2 Banks of the Anduin out. And, of course, with this ability to be able to look at the encounter deck, what I was doing is I was travelling to the Banks of the Anduin, I was exploring it, it was going to the top of the encounter deck, And then I was able to look at the top 3 cards. I would just choose Banks of the Anduin again, put it back into the staging area, and then rinse and repeat. I mean, obviously, I was getting the extra encounter card as well.
Yeah, that was something similar I did for when we did the Journey Down the Anduin, which is really amazing. If that one comes out, I think it was on the second quest card. I think then it's just you can just keep sailing down without getting any more enemies. I tried to do that this time, and then I had to engage an enemy, and then it came as a shadow card. I was like, oh no, I forgot about that, and then it was gone. But
yes, because for quest card 1, of course, you look at the 3 cards before you quest, or is it after you quest?
So on the first card, it's after you quest successfully. So look at it after the player's quests successfully. The first player looks at the top 3 cards of your encounter deck, reveal and add one of those cards to the staging area, discard the other 2.
Yeah, so that's what I was doing with Banks of the Anduin. So I quest successfully, I would explore the banks, and then it would go to the top of the encounter deck. Then I'd look at the 3 and then put the banks back in. So when you got it as a shadow card, that must have been on quest card 2, which perhaps we should just move on to now.
But an interesting one there, just to clear something up. So after the player's quest successfully. So when is that exactly?
I actually looked this up. I'm glad that your brain has now become just as twisted as mine when it comes to this sort of thing.
I'm just paranoid about anything good that happens to you in this game is normally too good to be true.
No, because I was thinking, is it before the tokens hit the cards? You know, that's basically because that's what makes a decision. It's like and I looked it up and I couldn't find like a definitive like ruling from Fantasy Flight or anything like that. But what I did find in the rules of play and in sort of turn references and things, that basically that you have deemed to quest successfully when your willpower is greater than the threat in the staging area, and then you place the tokens. It's all one element. I'm going to look it up right now because it was something that...
Yeah, because what was confusing me about this was you quest successfully. Let's say the total threat against you was 8 and you quested for 10, so you're going to get 2 progress. But then you have to add a card to the staging area. Does that count against your quest at that point? So if you add a card for 3, you actually lose 1.
No, because you have already quested successfully. Yeah. So you've already finished questing. You don't quest successfully and hold tokens in your hand and then cards come out and then you place the tokens. That whole questing includes putting the tokens down, because if you quested unsuccessfully, it wouldn't be like you quested unsuccessfully, you had to do something and then you'd put your threat up. I think it's all included.
That's what I assumed. I didn't look that deeply, to be honest, but that's what I assumed and that's the way I played it. But I think it's good just to clear that. It did cause me a little bit of confusion, but like I said, I didn't spend loads of time looking it up or worrying about it.
No, and you absolutely shouldn't be worrying about it, because it's like this is this is an excellent quick reference guide I've got, actually, which is available if you search for it on Board Game Geek, which is kind of an in-depth version of what you'll find in the rule book of when stages in the game process start and stop. So during the quest, it's that's 3.4 of the stages, and that's quest resolution, which is, as we know, still performed even if no characters have quested. We know that. So this is the order of play. So add together all willpower values from committed characters still alive. Then add threat of all cards in the staging area, and then it defines what happens. So if willpower is less than the threat, then you must increase your threat by the difference. And then it defines that if willpower is greater than the threat, add difference in progress to current location. That's the next step. And then it moves on to things like, if the location is complete, you place the tokens on the quest card. And if the quest is complete, you discard the extra progress tokens and move on to the next quest. See, that is all stage 3.4.
Right, so it's all done in one go, one step.
All go. So putting the tokens down is part of that.
It's part of questing successfully.
Exactly, because the next thing that happens after that is you're allowed to play actions, and that's the end phase, 3.5, which characters are no longer considered committed to a quest, but they remain exhausted. So basically, in that action window, when things could happen, You're no longer committed to a quest. We know that because you can't influence things at that point. But everything's happened. So therefore, if that's the same for the player, it must be the same for the encounter deck. So when it says after you've quested successfully, that's after you've placed the tokens.
Yeah.
So basically, I could recycle Banks of the Android. But I could only do that on quest card 1, because quest card 2, which you're going to read any second, does a very similar thing, but moves that point of exploring the encounter deck.
Yeah. So the second card is called A New Terror Abroad, and it says, "The wood was full of a rumour of him, dreadful tales, even among beasts and birds. The woodman said that there was some new terror abroad, a ghost that drank blood." And that's just a quote from the Fellowship of the Ring.
I was going to say, what the hell is that?
And there's a picture of I think some kind of horned creature like a goat or something like this, which looks like someone's taken a bit of a meal, made a meal of it, literally.
Taking a chunk out of it.
Taking a chunk out of it. That's a clue for Gollum, obviously. So flipping that over, you see that you need 10 progress to complete this card. Rumours have led you to the eaves of Mirkwood Forest, where the woodmen whisper of a new terror in the night. Forced, at the beginning of the quest phase, the first player looks at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. So beginning of the quest phase. Reveal and add one of those cards to the staging area, discard the other. So, yeah, what I like about these 2 cards, I think, is just in terms of the story, what's going on in this quest is on the first card, you quest successfully, and then after that, you have to have a look at 3 cards and you pick one of them and put them in. So the way I sort of feel that works into the story is you're taking kind of big steps and you've got a choice of where to go. Okay, let's go in this direction, etc. Whereas this card,
yeah, you have a look over there. Is there a sign of Gollum? No, but there is a forest and some orcs. Well, we better deal with one of them.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is I think it's more you're taking some more kind of. You're taking bigger steps, whereas in the second one, it's at the beginning of the quest phase. You look at the top 2 cards and encounter one. So now you start to snoop around a bit more. Whereas the first one, you're honing down on these clues and on your objective.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt it anyway.
Yeah, you're looking in a smaller area.
Exactly. Yeah. So first card's all about let's go in this direction. Okay, we've done that. Let's go in that direction. The second card's more about it's got to be something around here. Let's have a closer look.
Yeah. Although I didn't find any signs of Gollum.
Okay. And that may have some consequences.
I mean, I was looking around. I was finding the banks of the Anduin just where I left it.
Yeah, there is an inherent flaw in that tactic of it.
I was finding a few goblins, but I was finding no signs of Gollum.
So it's a similar kind of thing you have to go through. So as we just said, you look at the top 2 cards of your encounter deck at the beginning of a quest, so before you've committed anyone. So you can kind of manage it a little bit just based on, you know what the card is before you've started committing characters to the quest or whatever. You obviously have to reveal another one during staging. And this one, you need to go progress 10 rather than 8, which was the first card. I found this one, and technically it should be more challenging than the first one, just to get an extra card each time. But what I was finding was, I think with a sort of quest-heavy focused deck and the amount of locations in this encounter deck, I was finding that actually a lot of the time it was just burning through sort of location cards, making sure you're getting through them, and you could just sort of inch your way through the card. So it's a little bit more dense than the first card, but from a challenge perspective, it was quite similar. But it's all about finding that objective, really.
Yeah, well, apparently
staying alive and not having your threat go up too much.
No, exactly. I mean, I was also using it to sort of find treacheries that weren't going to affect me too badly, and then just revealing that one and moving it on, so that you didn't have any extra threat coming into the staging area.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really have any trouble at this. Well, I say I didn't have any trouble at this stage because I was managing the encounter deck. I was bringing out what I needed to, that I knew I could get past. Everything was fine. I was ploughing through it, still didn't find any clues, and completed it quite easily.
So did I. So, without any further ado, shall we move on to the last quest card?
Yeah, I think we should.
That was quick, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're sailing through this.
So the third one is called On the Trail. And it's got another quote from the Fellowship of the Ring on the front, which says, but at the western edge of Mirkwood, the trail turned away. It wandered off southwards and passed out the wood elves Ken,
All right,
and
Ken.
was lost. That's a Gandalf. Obviously, Ken's mate Gandalf. And when you flip it over, you only need 8 to defeat this. Any player who does not control a hero with at least one clue objective attached cannot commit characters to this quest. So if you're playing 2-player, and one of you's got a clue and the other one hasn't, the one who hasn't can't commit to quests. If there are ever no heroes with clue objectives attached in play, reset the quest deck to stage 2B, which is what both you and I had to do. And do you know what the funny thing was? A few weeks ago, we played this 2-player, and we forgot then, and we forgot again now. Even though the whole thing about objectives was fresh in my mind. So, right, you've got to have an objective to finish this. I remember that. Didn't remember this blasted card. So,
oh dear.
So straight back to 2B. So I ended up going through 2B, I think 2 or 3 times before I.
Well, you didn't learn. You didn't get. Well, actually,
I couldn't help it.
I better. Well,
you were questing.
You couldn't help yourself. You couldn't help yourself.
Well, it's all about the risk of not questing, right? Because so it's really clever because you can control it to an extent because you choose which card comes off the deck before the quest phase. But then you could get stitched up. How I was trying to control this was I had Faramir in play. So obviously, if you use his response or his ability, you can add +1 to everyone who's committed. So I tried to get it so I was beating what was out there by 3 or 4, and then see what happened on the staging. And if I was desperate, if something really bad happened, got surge, and suddenly there was some nasty stuff or what have you, I could always use Faramir to get me out of a tight spot. But then what would happen is if I got something which was a treachery or something like this, suddenly I was beating the quest by 4. It's like boom, 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 and you only need 10 to get through this. So there were generally locations there too, but obviously any overspill, because I had Northern Trackers and Lorien Guides in play, or one of each or whatever it was. So they're always sticking one on as well. So actually you can get through this quest by accident without an objective quite easily.
Well, shall I tell you what happened to me in a very similar line, but I couldn't allow what happened to you to happen to me because
okay. Too much threat.
Because, well, you may recall my deck starts with a very low threat, 24. Fine. And actually I managed to get 2 Gandalfs out early in the game, and even though I mentioned, I think last week, that I sort of very rarely use Gandalf to draw cards, I had such low threat, and I had no enemies to get rid of. I was just drawing cards like no. So I used Gandalf twice to draw 6 cards in total, and he was gone. And then I was questing fine and getting through the thing fine and not finding any clues fine. And obviously, round upon round, my threat was going up and up and up and up and up. And I think there's a few there's a few treacheries in there which will move your threat up as well. And then I had to reset to stage 2, as we just discussed. And then I think the first card off of the deck was a clue. It's like, fantastic. And it was guarded by Gladden Fields. So just a reminder of the Gladden Fields. It's a location. It's a marshland, and it has threat of 3, and it takes 3 to explore it. It has a force effect. Whilst Gladden Fields is the active location, each player must raise his threat by an additional point during the refresh phase, which of course I did not want. But I had to get this clue. So I actually managed to use a Northern Tracker on it, and then I killed someone with Legolas who also had a
blade of
Gondolin on him. So I managed to sort of clear it straight away. So I didn't actually have that forced effect of the of my threat going up, and the clue went to the staging area, because just a reminder, the clues can only be claimed after you've quested successfully. So the fact that I'd explored that location, I'd explore that location by using Legolas's ability. That was already in the
combat phase.
In the combat phase, so I had to wait another round to be able to claim that objective. So another round went by, and next card off of the encounter deck was another clue. Fantastic!
I know where this is going. So there's 2 in play.
Yeah, and that second clue got guarded by a treachery, so there was 2 up there. All I had to do was quest successfully. I could claim those 2 cards.
Yeah.
And I'd be laughing.
Sounds easy.
It is. So, stage 2, reset, is in play. I have 7 progress on it. So, I'm in trouble here. There's no location.
You've got to hit like this sliver. You got to hit the bullseye, basically, right? You got 1 dart.
I need to quest successfully for either 1 or 2 progress.
Yeah.
If I quest for 3, the quest is immediately completed, and I haven't claimed those objectives, and I've got to go right through stage 2 again. So I had a decision to make. But of course, you may remember from the beginning of our conversation, I turned Eowyn into a super quester. So she was questing for 6, no matter what.
Did you have anything else in the staging area, or was it just these 2 objectives?
No, I think there was one. I have a picture somewhere, but I think there was one other thing in there, one location, probably Banks of the Anduin. And I was thinking, yeah, it was Banks of the Anduin, which I think only contributes 1 threat. So I really had to make a decision.
You should have travelled there.
No, but I couldn't.
No, the previous game.
No, I had to go to the Gladden Fields to explore it to get the clue.
You did it from the combat. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh no, that's horrible. I was thinking, then why don't you just protect yourself with a location? Oh, that's why.
Yeah, because I.
Oh god. Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't risk questing with. Well, if I quested with Eowyn, there's no way. So I decided I'd only quest for 3. I think it was with a scout, a tracker, and someone else.
Farlin. You must have quested a hero, otherwise you wouldn't be able to claim the objectives.
Dune here.
Dune here was, yeah. They both quest for 1, don't they? Those 2. So
I think it was Dune here.
Makes sense.
It must have been Dune here or Legolas, but I think it was Dune here.
Yeah. So.
But it actually didn't matter because I quested for 3, and then
I know who's coming.
So no, I only quested 3. So therefore, if there was a treachery, if it was treachery that came out, then I would still be all right because there was 1 threat in the staging area, and
yeah, you'd have 2.
I'd still have 2. So then the first thing came out, another Gladden Fields, which is 3 threat. So I quested unsuccessfully. So my threat is now on 47.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah.
Why did you take the cards? With 2 Gandalfs.
But with that Gladden Fields, I had to reset the encounter deck because I'd gone all the way through the encounter deck. So.
Oh, no.
I reset that. I travelled to the Gladden Fields, which was good because it means basically I've got plenty of buffer to get through that. So that I wasn't too worried about. But I was a bit worried that I was about to start threatening out. But I figured I could just get through that, get the objectives. I've got so much willpower now, I'll be able to just plough through the third quest.
But then your threat's going to go up by 2 with Gladden Fields.
Yeah, but I was just going to get through it, and I can't remember how exactly I did it. I think again, but with a Legolas trick.
Right.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I travelled. Oh no, well perhaps it wasn't up to 47 at that point. You're right because it would have gone up.
Maybe it was 46.
Yeah, it was certainly in the mid-40s.
Either way.
Yeah, because I've made a note that my threat was at 48 when I got onto stage 3B.
Yeah, okay, fine.
So, at that point, so anyway, I must have gone up 1 extra for Gladden Fields, like you say. And then I had a completely reset encounter deck. I had to look at the top 2 cards. I think I chose a treachery that didn't do anything and moved on. So I then quested with Eowyn, and probably just Eowyn for for 6 because I knew I still had Banks the Anduin up there. I had the 3 from the Gladden Fields. And I thought, right, I'll just get through this. I'll be then able to win this without too much grief. The first things off of the encounter deck was the crows. Which
you should have quested Farlin. You would have been fine.
I didn't have Farlin. I had Legolas.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So then I had crows.
I keep banging on about Farlin. That's my deck. All right, you had crows. I know what's coming.
Do you know what they surged into?
Mordor orcs.
Crows.
More crows.
And then into Pursued by Shadow, which is a very nasty treachery that I think raises your threat by the number of allies not questing.
Correct.
But luckily, I only had 2 allies not questing because that's right. I had a Northern Tracker and a Scout because I was dealing with other locations all over the place. So they were questing, and I think I had a Gondorian Spearman and an Eagle or something. So I had 2, and that's what put my threat up to 48. So that put my threat up to 48. I did manage to claim both objectives. Just.
I know you fine. And complete it.
Yeah, but then it went through. Did it complete the whole thing? I think I then had to kill something. Oh yeah, I killed a crow with Legolas
to complete the quest.
To complete the quest. That put me onto the. Oh no! I think I got some shadow card on the crows that took tokens off of the bloomin' quest. But anyway, I still managed to do it with Legolas because he had the Blade of Gondolin as well. So it managed to complete it. I got onto stage 3B with my threat at 48. First card off of my deck, Gandalf.
Oh.
So I drew 3 cards. No,
yeah.
so
you destroyed the other crows.
No, so I lowered my threat to 43, and I could breathe again. And then, do you know what the next card off the encounter deck was?
The Hunts from Mordor.
No. Another treachery. False lead. Now we'll read this one.
Oh no, this is horrible.
So a false lead is a treachery, and it says, when revealed, the first player chooses and shuffles a card with the printed clue trait back into the encounter deck. If there are no clue cards in play, false lead gains search. But more importantly, at this stage, if there were no clue cards in play, then we'd have to reset back to stage 2B. But luckily, I managed to claim both those clues. So one went back.
Yeah.
And I could continue. And
yeah,
with that, I won by just questing everybody. And I just beat stage 3 in one hit.
So false lead is the one that you want to see early in the game, but not later.
I do apologize. I was quite a ramble there, but that was basically I was just having a nice leisurely trip hunting for Gollum.
It can go horribly wrong.
Well, when you start with a starting threat of 24, you think you've got all the time in the world.
Yeah. Exactly. And I played with my heroes on this. The last time I did it was Eowyn and Theodred. They had a starting threat of 17. I still couldn't get to reduce it, but anyway, I wasn't too much danger of fretting out with those guys. But card 3B, there was one bit I didn't read out, which is the last sentence, and it goes back. So this thing I was going to remember. See, the long bottom leaf hasn't completely destroyed my mind.
Oh, I'm surprised you can remember anything after I think I've ranted for the last 5 minutes.
No, but it's great. I love it. I mean, that's the great thing about this game, isn't it? I've always been drawn to games, and I think this is probably says something about my upbringing as well, and playing games with my dad and my sister and whoever. We always enjoyed games where something chaotic can happen, or you can be almost win and then you're completely gutted, or whatever. And this is absolutely one of those games. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Because you can go from you're just on the verge of winning to absolute, like a combination of events. How can these events transpire in that particular order? And it's hilarious. Anyone listening to that can obviously completely relate to it who's played this game. And that's one of the most joyous things about this game. Even though you're completely gutted and ruined, it's great. It's just so funny. And then the flip side of that coin is it can go the other way as well. You can go from, I'm doomed, this is despair, and suddenly some chain of events can occur, or you have to have some certain combination of cards or whatever, which can suddenly get you out of a almost impossible situation. And that's such a good thing about this game.
It's wonderful.
It swings and roundabouts, isn't it? And sometimes you can just sail through something. Sometimes you can just fall straight off the cliff in the first couple of goes, and everything in between. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Terrific. So, sorry, I interrupted you again. What were you about to say?
No, so okay,
the line of text which we didn't read out.
Yeah, so in fact, I'll just read through the card again. So it says, any player who does not control a hero with at least one clue objective attached cannot commit characters to this quest. If there are ever no heroes with clue objectives attached in play, reset the quest deck to stage 2B. So this is important, what you're saying, something to bear in mind. If you, just as you said, if you do get that false lead, and that's taken away the last objective in play, you have to go back to 2B. So that can happen literally at the last second, So something to bear in mind there. I haven't had that one happen to me yet. Then the last line says, and this is just for condition for winning, if the players defeat the stage, the players have once again found a true sign of Gollum's passing and won the game. I'm going to say that again. If the players... This is the first time you've ever played this. If the players defeat the stage, the players have once again found a true sign of Gollum's passing and won the game. So bearing that in mind, maybe it should be called A Hunt for Gollum, because it's one of many, rather than The Hunt for Gollum, because this kind of implies that it's more than one.
We've been here before.
Once again, I don't. It's obvious, it's clear what it means. I just don't understand that wording where it says once again. I've never played this before.
I think they were just their aspirations of storytelling. I think.
Yes, I mean that must be what it is.
But I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed playing this quest again. I mean, I really did have a good time with it. But the same thing happens. I think every time I play it, though, I get the same feeling when I finish it, which is, where's Gollum? Because I mean, yeah. I remember when I first got the AP. It's like, oh, we're going to be looking for Gollum. Okay, Gollum's going to be the final thing. We're going to find Gollum. No, we're not going to find Gollum. We're going to succeed in hunting for him.
We're going to find a clue.
Yeah.
The first... I know what you mean.
It's a little bit anticlimactic in that respect. But, I mean, I forgive it quite quickly. But it's like, okay, here we go. I mean, but don't put Gollum in the name of the AP and then don't feature him.
Well, I think... So what dawned on me doing this one was... Yeah, okay, it's called The Hunt for Gollum. And what this... So you play the core set, right? And you've got three... we talked about this at length before. You've got three quests, which kind of introduce you to different aspects of the game, different ways of storytelling, and whatever. We discussed that at length before. This is a cycle, the first one. And I was of the same mind. I was like, oh, there's no Gollum. And I was also a little bit confused about the fact that in that sheet, it says you have to find as many objectives as possible. But actually, you don't. Actually, it might be better just to only have one in play and just get rid of all the others, right? You only need one, right?
I highly recommend two.
okay, but fine. But then if you do get one of these hunters, then suddenly they're getting +2 for each. If you've got 4 in play, 10. I mean, no chance. Anyway, long story short, when I finished this one, the first time I played it, I was kind of thinking, I didn't quite... I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't quite get the fact that I didn't find Gollum. I didn't quite get the fact that about its clues. But the clues that was just more a games mechanic thing. About the Gollum bit, though, was the good thing about that. Is what that made me realise is, actually, this is a cycle. This is just a portion of a bigger story, which surely is going to unfold as we go on. And I don't want to talk about anything that happens later on because we'll cover those as we go on. But that was my feeling at the time when I got to the end of this. I thought, oh, yes, I'd wanted to see Gollum, but at the same time, I was like, oh, this is a larger narrative. In that way, it makes it much more Lord of the Rings like in its scope, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Yeah. I mean, I mean, you're absolutely right, of course, but it's called Hunt for Gollum.
You're still you were hunting for Gollum. It's part of the hunt.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. If I was to try and bring a lawsuit against it, I think I'd probably lose. Let's say, well, sir, were you or were you not hunting for Gollum?
Yes.
Well, yes, but did you hunt for Gollum? Yes, I did. Did you find him? I found a clue. Well, the hunt continues.
Well, the hunt was a success.
Once again. I have found a true sign of Gollum.
When you go all the way back to card 1A, the first line says, Gandalf has requested your assistance in the search for the elusive creature known as Gollum. Your search begins in the Anduin Valley between Mirkwood Forest and the Misty Mountains. That's where this whole thing takes place. So it's kind of suggesting a larger story at work here.
Well, we were in the neighbourhood because Lady Gladriel had already sent us off to have a nosy around Dol Guldur.
Yeah.
And we're on our way back.
And that was nice, wasn't it?
Well, it was an absolute waste of time is what it was.
Thanks, lady.
Yeah, and then what was this? Oh, it was a wizard. What, can I help you? Yeah, you couldn't help me find this creature Gollum. Yeah, sure. Where do you want us to look? Well, anywhere around here would be fine. Yeah, okay, well, all right.
Well, where would be a likely location? The Anduin, of course.
Yeah.
Is that what it says? I can't remember.
You literally just read it.
Yeah. Rumours have suggested that Gollum is in this area. There you go. So.
Rumours.
This is what it says on the insert card. Look at this. Okay, all right. Check this out. The hunt for Gollum. This is what the first thing it says on here, right? At the request of Gandalf, the heroes are searching for Gollum in the Anduin Valley between the Misty Mountains and Mirkwood Forest. Rumours have suggested that Gollum is in this area, and the heroes are looking for clues that might put them on the elusive creature's trail. And then in the next thing, it literally says the objective is to find clues. So I think our disappointment was, I think, ironically, our powers of sleuth detective work failed massively, even though we passed the actual quest.
Yeah, but did the heroes say to Gandalf, yeah, well, we can do that for you, Gandalf. Do you have any documentation or anything we should read first?
He just said, well, he said, look for clues, lads. And ladies. Oh, blimey.
Oh, dear. Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's a couple of other cards from the encounter set that I want to go over. I mean, or do you have any tales of how you completed it in the end that you want to talk about before we do that?
Not really. I think in a general way, I think, just the number of locations and the nature of the quest, I think you need to be able to quest, I guess. I might be wrong about that. I don't think I've tried this with a kind of fighting heavy deck, but I would assume it's kind of difficult to do it that way.
Yeah, you actually, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think there are enough enemies to... I mean, yeah, you have to be able to quest through all the locations. I mean, you're searching, aren't you? So thematically, that does make sense as well. There are some nasty enemies, but as long as you've got a little bit of firepower, you should be okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of nasty treachery. So we spoke about false lead, which is one that discards for clues. And what I like about a couple of these treacheries is at the beginning, they do nothing, but later on, they can really harm you. So you already mentioned one. Oh, what was it called? The one, was it Pursued by Shadow?
Oh, yeah.
So everyone is not committed to a quest, raise your threat by 1. That's a nasty one, especially if your threat's getting high.
Do you know what? I've just found a photo that I took of that when I drew that Pursued by Shadow. It put my thread up to 47 at that stage. So, if you want to go back and do the maths of where I was at, that's...
You're one off. You needed... Gandalf saved you. There, you see, you had to go at him, but he was there to pull you out, when you needed it. The other couple of treacheries, which are sort of specific to this deck, are... There's one called Old Wives' Tales.
Oh, yeah, I highlighted this.
Which is a gossip card. A gossip card.
Well, yeah, because someone's right there spreading rumours.
I like that.
That Gollum's out and about.
Gossip, but it could put you on a false direction, right? It's gossip.
Maybe give you a false lead.
Exactly.
Don't believe everything you hear.
It's gossip. It says when...
Dear listener, don't believe everything you hear.
Yeah, I think we can be pretty assured of that. If someone's listening to us. Okay. This one says...
I don't think these boys are speaking the truth.
You can trust us. Listen to these voices. It says, Old Wives' Tales, gossip. When revealed, discard one resource from each hero's resource pool if able. Exhaust any hero that could not discard a resource from its pool. So that's not massively nasty, but if it could have an effect as each hero will lose a resource, or you could end up exhausting somebody when you least need it.
Yeah, I think that's actually the toughest bit, is if you don't have the resources that you suddenly get an exhausted hero.
So this one's probably the opposite of what I was alluding to earlier, in that this one you probably want to see later in the game rather than earlier, where you probably got more chance of being able to afford stuff. Whereas at the beginning, I'm guessing your resource is going to be pretty much zero in the first few goes. And then we have a disaster. Oh, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say it, but actually, I think you just gonna say it. I was gonna say, can I say just my favourite treachery in this deck? And that's you were just about to say it. It's flooding, and I love this card.
So
I hate it. It's horrible.
It's great,
but I love it. But it's flooding, and what I love about it is it's a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Disaster. I've always loved the word disaster. There's something comical about the word disaster. It's so. It's a disaster. Everything has gone wrong. Everything.
It makes me laugh so much. It's horrible. It's a terrible card. But flooding, disaster.
All hope has gone, extinguished in a flood.
But it's a particularly nasty card. It's doomed one, so your threat's going up by one. Boom. It's got surge, so you're getting another card. Yeah. One thing after another. And it's got a when revealed effect. So when revealed, remove all progress tokens from all Riverland locations, which of course thematically is brilliant. There's been a disaster.
It's a disaster.
And basically, you were searching this Riverland area. Now it's underwater. Go and search it again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, isn't every location of Riverland in this? I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't think it's everyone, because it mixes in. I think everyone from the Gollum set is, but then.
Gladden Fields is marshland rather than Riverland.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's the Eaves of Mirkwood as well.
I'm just looking through now. That's a forest. Yeah. So all the others are, but there are some with chance. Yeah. And also, I like the shadow effect of this card as well. Shadow, resolve for when revealed effect of this card.
Lazy writing. Lazy designers.
Great. What should we do for this? Well, the when reveal's really bad. Let's call it, okay. You're like, first time it happens, at least I got this as a shadow rather than
Yeah. Disaster. Oh, dear.
And then you have some of our other favourites. So we already discussed Pursued by Shadow. Do you have our old Treacherous Fog? Each location in the staging area gets +1 until the end of the phase. Then, each player with a threat of 35 or higher chooses and discards one card from his hand. So, again, one which comes into play later.
Yeah. Exactly, and that I was getting that card, or I got that card when you're choosing 3 cards in that stage 1. If you can choose that one, you bring it in immediately. It's going to have no effect.
And this one's similar, Evil Storm. When revealed, deal 1 damage to each character controlled by each player with a threat of 35 or higher. So again, these ones you want to see at the beginning. You can just burn them off for no loss. But then towards the end of the game, when your threat is high and your players have got some damage and all the rest of it, then you don't want to see them. So I like the way this quest balances. So you want to see different cards at different points, and yeah, it's a good quest. I enjoy this one.
Yeah, there's some nice cards. There's one other enemy card which we haven't mentioned, which I also thought was quite nice, but also because I had quite a nice way of dealing with it, which is the Goblin Town Scavengers. I just like the fact that they're the Goblin Town Scavengers. That sounds, it's just invokes a lovely image. And they are a Goblin and an Orc enemy, of course. They have an engagement cost of 12. They have threat of 1. They hit for 1. They have no defense, and they have 3 hit points. So they're pretty soft and fleshy, but they do have quite a nasty when revealed effect, which is when revealed, discard the top card of each player's deck until the end of the phase. Increase Goblin Town Scavenger's threat by the total printed cost of all cards discarded in this way.
That's nasty if you're playing 2-player, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. So obviously this gets exponentially worse the more players you've got. But actually, top tip: if you are playing Dune here, you can just bring this guy out. You will discard the top card of your deck. You'll add that to the threat, and then if you've got Quick Strike, just what I did is I played Quick Strike, immediately play Dune here, and kill this guy in the staging area. So therefore, that whole threat thing is nullified, which was just felt good. And it's sometimes nice just to make a note of these nice little plays, which make it all worth it.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, and failing that, then you can always... Well, what I did is you could suck up the threat on that one round. Like, I was only playing solo, so it wasn't... I think I only got him twice. One time I did it with that quick attack with Dune here. And then another time, I think I had to add 2 to his threat. Then I brought him in as an optional engagement and killed him with Legolas in one hit. So it actually helped with my progress anyway, so... Yeah,
and he's got an engagement cost. These guys got an engagement cost of 12, so you're pretty much going to engage these guys every time. They're not going to. They'll stitch up once in the staging area, and then they're coming.
Yeah, the scavengers,
exactly, and not just scavengers. Goblin Town Scavengers, the worst.
Oh, the worst. Have you ever stayed there?
No,
Good
no,
God.
No. Passed through.
Don't blame you.
I do like some of the locations on this deck, I must say. So in terms of the artwork and the theming, it's great. In fact, the way the theming works throughout this whole thing, even the treachery cards, they all completely stay within that theme of you're by the river. You're exploring it. It's great. I think the more time you take just take a couple of seconds just to look at the cards, the location, just adds so much to the atmosphere. In my opinion. It's really worth it. And actually, some of the artwork on these is
it's beautiful.
It's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point in the staging area, I had the West Bank and the East Bank, and I was currently on the banks of the Anduin. It's like, yeah, well, this kind of makes sense. I'm on the banks of the Anduin, and then the East Bank is over there, and the West Bank is over there. Where should we go and look next? So thematically, it really, really nails it. It hits it out of the park,
Yeah.
And of course, after my beef from last week with the locations that turned up in a dungeon, this one really brings it back onto track.
Yes, completely. Yeah, I agree with that. It completely stays within the theme.
Okay, I think we've pretty much covered everything this quest has to offer. I mean, like I say, I really had quite a good time revisiting it, and it really it's great when you come out of the core set and you start to open up these APs. And yeah, okay, this quest is not. It's not as complex as anything like Escape from Dol Guldur, and yeah, maybe you don't find Gollum, but like you say, it really starts to open up the story, and it certainly whets the appetite for further quests to come. And I'm excited to start playing through these again.
Yep, same here. Yep, really good quest, really enjoyable, different take on things as what compared to what we've seen already in the core set, and excited to do next ones.
Great. Okay, well, we'll be getting on with the next one, which I believe is Conflict at the Carrack.
Oh, yeah. That's the one.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. Okay, but we'll be doing that. But next week, we will be having a sort of non-spoiler episode where we'll be starting to look at some of the player cards from the first cycle. I'm not sure which ones yet, but we'll work that out. So we're not going to hang around. We're not going to do any non-spoilery stuff, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. So that pretty much wraps things up for this week. So all it leaves me to say is thank you once again for listening. It's good to be back, and we'll speak to you next time. So goodbye.
Bye.